So that the ideal of the anti-natural is to actually destroy under the guise of this beneficence. And those who really don't understand the narrative and the complexity with which this narrative unfolds get consumed in the myth. So I tried to make, that bit is not easy to understand at all. So I tried to sort of give you a graphic depiction of what Nietzsche is talking about, because this part is a little bit more complicated, right? So we're going to say that the moral law is anti-natural. A-N-T-I. Okay. And the moral agent, I'm serving as judge. Right? I'm serving as judge, right? I have the power to judge, to say that it is good. My judgment is that it's good, moral, or that it is evil, immoral. Everything in scare quotes. Okay. I assume that what I'm doing is a descriptive account, which we already know is problematic, right? It's not prescriptive. I'm saying that this act, these systems of belief, this particular institution is evil, is bad, and I believe that what I'm doing, based on the power given to me by the anti-natural system, legitimizes sort of the condemnation, if I'm condemning. So, an impoverished worldview which thwarts the quest for perfection, right? So, impoverishment. The world becomes impoverished. And that impoverishment is failing. It's an obstacle, it's an obstruction to me arriving at a state of perfection. The impoverishment of the world, the decadence of the world, the indulgence of the world, the carnality of the world, all of this is an impediment to my personal quest for perfection. So what ends up happening? Next, destruction of the natural as a means of attaining, of actualizing perfection. I have to in turn destroy this impoverishment, right? U-C-T, destruction of, and I should put systematic. I-M-P-R-O-V, impoverished world. Right? I have to destroy this impoverishment, right? The world's impoverished, as told to me via my system. It has put me in a position to judge what is good and what is evil, right? This is a good act, this is an evil act. I'm legitimized in my judgment. Why? Because I see the impoverishment. There it is right there. You got these types of people here. You have those types of people here. Look what's being done in this sort of the world, part of the world. Look what's doing, that's not like me, blah, blah, blah. I start to create this narrative. I start to create this narrative. As I'm creating this narrative, I'm not aware that my opponent is creating a diametrically opposed narrative. They're doing that. They're doing that. They're not like us. We're both creating narratives demonizing the other. Now, there is a belief that it could be better than that. There'll be a state where all of us will live in happiness. But what I'm going to need to do in order to get to that state of perfect peace is to destroy the impoverished bits of the world. Them. So, I destroy them systematically, and after which I arrive at, peace and happiness and perfection and utopia and bliss and, marshmallow roasting, open campfires and such. Right? The idea is, this is a formula for global destruction. Right? My opponent has, if you want to get political, my opponent is nuclear capable, I'm nuclear capable. We don't have economic ties and relationships, nothing really binding us except for the fact that we both have the means to destroy each other. We're going to end up destroying each other, right? Because there isn't, as I said in the last lecture series in Ethics and Qualitative Methods Research, there isn't a mutual attentiveness. You need that mutual attentiveness in a purely egoistic fashion, right? It's not about me being an altruist, right? Which I'll talk about later. In a purely wholesale egoistic fashion, recognizing that all I'm dealing with and all I'm talking to are egoists, but we as egoists can be mutually attentive to the needs of each other, egoistically, right? This is not what happens. What ends up happening is we end up destroying in in the hopes of attaining perfection, rather than recognizing, you know what, they do business different from us, and their system isn't as good as us. And you know, you could even go so far as to say their system's ridiculous, it's weak, it's hopeless, it's futile. Sure, right? And they're saying the same about you. And you can have sort of tension, right? You can have tension. There can be combat, right? There can be war. There can be violence. There can be death. There can be murder, right? Right? There could even be genocide. There could be a gross, really horrible recognition of that which really is, that this is who we are. We are the type of people that orchestrate institutions of power to implement that power in the destruction of things around us. And we might say that we should change aspects of that, and let's try. Let's try. You should. But to say that it is bad in and of itself assumes that there's some access to what really good is and what really bad is. And as the lecture series progresses, especially these, you know, this, since I just started again, there's a lot in Nietzsche that I can't incorporate. It's my series, so I determine how the narrative unfolds. But I have to make a narrative theme out of all of this, right? And the idea is, why don't we just recognize that it's the state of impoverishment isn't a state of impoverishment, right? That the error is here. It's not impoverished at all. It is what is. Human beings kill other human beings. Human beings are capable of doing the most heinous of acts. But human beings are equally capable, the same human beings are equally as capable as any other human being of showing the greatest levels of sympathy, of empathy, of bravery, of valor, of heroism, one and the same. So that it isn't this either or, right? It's not this sort of disjunctive relationship. Either you're good or you're bad. You're a bit of both. It depends on the context. And depending on the context that you're in, you as a person might perform in a bad way, in an evil way. You as a person might perform in a good way. This is what Nietzsche's going to, right? He's moving us towards a recognition of the collapse of the duality of good and evil, such that good and evil in the end become far more complicated and far more in flux than this sort of really trite belief that good and evil is in any sense this diametrically opposed fact of the matter, that it exists in the world as diametrical opposition, right? Nietzsche is not having any of that. The point is, then, insofar as we recognize the problem, one, inheres within the belief for the individual that personal immortality is the goal. Now, you might disagree with that, and that's fine, but for Nietzsche, the problem inheres within the belief that personal immortality is the goal, because that belief leaves the personal devotee open to institutions of exploitation that seek specifically to monopolize on that belief in order to get the person to perform in a certain way for the entirety of their life. Similarly, on a historical level, when we're talking about the historical progression of systems of structured belief globally now, ethically now, it is equally problematic to say that history is unfolding towards a state of perfection. You can say it linguistically, sure. You cannot say it ontologically at all. You really shouldn't even be saying it epistemologically, because there's no way we could ever know of that state of perfection. How would you know that that state of perfection, historically speaking, had manifest? It's ridiculous. It can't. Actually, you can't know it epistemically, and you can't know it ontologically, but linguistically, you can say it, right? There's some value to saying it, right? Just know what you're saying. Even more dangerous, however, than this sort of misassociation between the linguistic relationship and the ontic relationship is the real core of the problem, that there is a sense in which a state of perfection is even possible. The actual attempt to try and achieve that historical condition of perfection is itself problematic. And how is that state of historical achievement of perfection attained? It's attained by those who create social discourse. Academics, scientists, engineers, scholars, the people who, the teachers, those are the individuals in place to determine and dictate, really, what society is, right? So, if anything, and I know a vast majority of the people who watch my videos, especially if you're this deep into the video, you're like me. We're social constructionists. We do this for a living. We create society for a living, to better or less extent, right? You got to recognize that insofar as you assume this responsibility as sort of a creator of society, that there are ethical dimensions, a huge ethical dimension to what it is that we do. And if you, as an individual social constructionist, not in a theoretical sense or in an academic sense, in a more abstracted sense, the individual people who create the foundations with which we discuss this notion of society, people who write the books,